Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the regular meeting of Council to order. Our clerk today will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. I'd ask for a procedural motion to proceed in camera. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Perino. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the May 15th regular meeting of Council. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. Tonight's regular meeting of Council will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. The question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left for agenda items only. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. And we have everyone here tonight, so no one's joining us electronically. And the first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. Ms. Gurry, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. For late items this evening, agenda item 8A, RCMP annual update. We are adding the PowerPoint presentation titled Nanaimo RCMP, and that's it, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Motion for adoption of the agenda is amended. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Perino. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Armstrong, seconded Councillor Eastmere. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. On the Mayor's report tonight, I have a few items that I want to bring up. The first is Coolett. The climate education program had a very busy first year. That was a city-funded climate education program that continues into 2023. Nanaimo Council committed $10,000 in 2022 to support participation in the BC Sustainable Energy Association's Coolett Climate Leadership Training Program for Nanaimo school students. The city has since been granted additional funding to continue the program into 2023. It's a climate education workshop and contest for students in grades 4 to 5. That's when they're still young enough to listen to adults. And secondary school classes. Students participate in interactive workshops and games to support discussion and build on their knowledge of climate change. Following the workshop, students work on a 4-week Coolett challenge that encourages families to make important changes to their own energy consumption at home. The classroom that completes the most challenges wins the Coolett Climate Challenge for the area. In 2022, Miss Keenley Sides grade 5-6 class at Mountain View Elementary won the first ever Coolett Climate Change Challenge in the city after completing more than 350 climate action challenges. And I'm inviting everyone who's interested, and I suggest you do because it is great fun. Connecting the World Through Public Works. The community is invited to an open house. On Wednesday, May the 24th, the Public Works Department will host more than 400 grade 4 and 5 students and 200 members of the public in honor of Public Works Week, Connecting the World Through Public Works. Students will visit the Public Works Yard during the day, exploring interactive stations. Public Works staff will engage the students in learning about road maintenance, water distribution, solid waste recycling, and more. Staff will open the yard to the public between 3 and 6 p.m. Small groups will be guided through a number of stations and parts of the Public Works Yard with interactive educational information on how staff respond to weather events and maintain above and below ground assets to ensure the city runs smoothly. Open house tours are free, but registration is required to ensure enough tour guides are available. to register use code 97873 in the Parks, Recreation and Culture registration system at recreation.nanaimo.ca. Staff will also lead an exclusive guided tour of the watershed including South Fork Dam and South Fork Water Treatment Plant on Thursday, May 25th. This tour is also free. Registration is required and only a limited number of spots available. Please register for this tour, again using code 97872 this time. Council, on May the 8th at our special meeting, adopted the 2023-2027 financial plan and 2023 property tax rates bylaws. An increase of 6.2% to cover operating costs and 1% for the General Asset Management Reserve has been set for 2023. The 2023-2027 financial plan provides a coordinated, proactive approach to public safety and helps set the stage for revitalization of Nanaimo's core business and entertainment district. Some highlights include the 12 new community safety officers who have been functioning so well and literally, in several cases, saving lives, 2 community clean teams, downtown ambassadors program, seasonal park attendance program, vandalism relief grant program, additional downtown parkade cleaning, additional RCMP members, and 20 new firefighters. Property taxes are due on July the 4th, 2023, and I encourage everyone to pay on time. There is a 2% penalty, and it'll be increased to a further 8% if not paid by August, I believe the date is. The city is also seeking input on the community's preferred communications method. Some of us more senior folks prefer to see newspapers and things in writing, but that's not the way of the world. So the city has launched a survey to gain insight into how residents receive information on city news, events, programs, and initiatives. The survey is now available on the City Gets Involved website, Cities Get Involved site until June the 5th for anyone interested in providing input on this topic. Survey responses will inform the city on where residents go to get city information and improvements to consider. Community members can share their thoughts at www.getinvolvednanaimo.ca/2023 communications/survey. And then there's a few things that I want to mention, in particular 4 matters relating to people in our city. I firstly want to express on behalf of council our condolences to the Brookbank family. Ray Brookbank passed away on May the 1st. He was just short of his 93rd birthday. For those of you who've been in town a while, Ray and his wife Joyce, I think it's fair to say, were a power couple when it came to politics and community activity. He served on the Regional District of Nanaimo before becoming a member of the first City Council of the newly amalgamated city in 1975. And in addition, he was honored in 2008 by being made a Freeman of the City of Nanaimo. He also served as a director of the Nanaimo Harbor Commission and as a director of the Nanaimo Airport Commission too. He was a member for over 55 years of Doric Lodge number 18, one of the oldest Masonic lodges in the province. He enjoyed a good retirement, but he personified for many people who knew him, and as I say, his late wife Joyce, who passed in 2019, a real commitment to public service and community. And again, on behalf of the City of Nanaimo and its citizens, I extend condolences to his family. He is survived by his daughter Lori and his son Steve, and his grandsons Nathan and Joshua. Now, I want to mention something else about community service tonight. I give credit to Sydney Robertson, who is with the South End Community Association, for pointing this out. Many of you may have seen a couple, Joel Canfield and Melissa Griswold of Team Copenhagen in our city. They're the folks with those bicycles who wander around town on those bikes all over the place, collecting litter they find along the way. They are, in addition, often invited to join in community cleanups, and if invited, they'll zip round with the Sharps container and ferry full bags back to the pile. They're a volunteer service, and it really does make a difference. I tout them tonight because I know them to be good, wonderful citizens, and their example sets a standard for all of us who may complain about the state of the world and just do that, only complain. Joel and Melissa, in fact, get out and make a difference. Now, many of you know Merv Unger. Merv and Marge have been here for a long time. As Merv pointed out, over half his lifetime. One of the founders of the Bulletin newspaper, which is the last surviving paper in our community. Merv was a city councillor. It was with great courage when he and Diane Brennan, and perhaps unlikely political alliance, faced incredible challenges to secure supportive housing in our community. And Merv was right there from the beginning and courageous in doing so. I think the respect he's held in is no better reflected than by a luncheon that he had at Piper's on Friday, where you had in attendance myself as mayor, a former NDP MP, the spouse of the former Liberal MLA, Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Perino, several other members of the community of virtually every political stripe, including the former chair of the school board, Jamie Brennan, and Freeman of the City, his spouse, Diane Brennan. The Ungers are moving to be close to grandchildren, but I didn't want Merv's moving, not passage. Let's be clear about this. He's still hale and healthy at 83. I didn't want his move from town or Marge's move from town to go unrecognized. They gave a lot back to the community, and as I say, he demonstrated a lot of courage in what he undertook on council some time ago. And finally, I have something very interesting. I have a lovely book here. I'm not advertising it. It's Impressions from a Painted Road. The writer is Jeffrey Markovich. Mr. Markovich, through the good offices of Larry Kulai, who ran the Dairy Queen in town for years, offered to give to the city something he did 41 years ago. 41 years ago, he was a much younger man. He is now a pretty well-recognized artist, has homes in Kauai and in Victoria, and he did a portrait of Frank Ney. And he's had it for a very long time, and he wanted to see that it got back to the place where it belongs, to City Hall. I had a chance to meet him and his spouse, Ellen. They are a delightful couple. The man is a complete character, but he is also a very, very fine artist, I must say. And I'm going to, if the camera will indulge me, just hold up the portrait of Frank Ney that will be hung in City Hall in due course. And many of you will recognize the outfit. So I just want to say to Jeff, thank you very much, Jeff. It is a gracious gift, and Frank will still have his presence in City Hall felt for a very long time. So that is the end of my lengthy report tonight. Apologies for going on so long. We can rise and report, Ms. Gurry, although we've only recessed the in-camera meeting, or shall I wait till another date?
There's one item to rise and report on, Your Worship, and that's the Design Advisory Panel member appointment that was made at the May the 8th closed meeting, or the May 1st closed meeting, pardon.
Yes, and that is Jonathan Benke, landscape architect, is nominated by the British Columbia Society of Landscape Artists to the Design Advisory Panel. That's very good, thank you. The next item is under presentations. It's the RCMP annual update, and I'm delighted to welcome Superintendent Lisa Fletcher, officer in charge of the Nanaimo RCMP, to make the presentation. Superintendent Fletcher, welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship and Council, I'd like to introduce some of our newest additions to the Nanaimo detachment. We have Constable Jacondra Silken in the middle. We have Mark King on the far left, and we have Matt Plenert beside Silken. And they just finished their shift, and I think it's important that members start to learn all of the various parts, because someday someone's going to be standing here, and I didn't have any sense of how some of these things got done. So we're going to try and bring some of the new members in throughout the year. So welcome, guys. Please sit down and cover my back.
Thank you. Thank you, and welcome to the city.
Thank you for having me today. The intent of this presentation is a brief overview, and we're going to move along. If there's any questions, please let me know. Our detachment strength is 169 and approximately 76 civilian members, so we're well supported by the community with municipal employees, and we have one public service employee, 2. Last year, we covered approximately 45,000 files, a slight decrease from the previous year. Our breakdown between the provincial business line and the municipal business line is fairly well balanced in accordance with the number of members that we have on the provincial service. We have 11 members working within the provincial strength, and their calls for service is 6.8% of the total. Statistics for the first quarter. Last year we responded to 45,000 calls. This year we are approximately on track. We always see our second and third quarter being the highest, so it looks like we'll be about on track to last year, and 2019 was the exceptional year for service. The rest of them are relatively constant. Drug decriminalization has been a central topic this year, and you can see that the discretionary enforcement of drug possession has dropped right off in anticipation of the legislation that has come in. Our focus is on the higher level drug trafficking, drug production, as opposed to the street level, which I know the public may be becoming more accustomed to seeing, and that's for the purposes of public safety around the consumption because of the lethalness of it. Property offenses. We have seen a slight increase in that area. When we broke down the stats, it's still impacting a small percentage of our community. Obviously, the areas that we know has a greater impact is impact to businesses in terms of theft or break-in enters and shoplifting. And in this economy, that's obviously a concern for us. We are using 2 special initiatives to help address this. We have the Impact Auto Crime Unit will be coming into the community and focusing on catching and prosecuting individuals that are involved in auto theft. Obviously, that's something our police officers do, but the Impact team brings some specialized investigative techniques with them. And that's part of the RCMP program, so it's an included service. We will also be bringing in several times throughout this year the Uniform Gang Enforcement Team, and they are focusing on disruption, enforcement, and prosecution of violent or gang-related activities. I wanted to draw the attention to all of the various partners that we work with within the community, and I thought this was a good representation of all of the various ways that we connect, specifically through working our youth unit, very strong connections with Ministry for Family, same with our Vulnerable Persons unit, traffic safety, our Indigenous communities with our Indigenous leadership. As I said, there are continuous and ongoing working groups so that we can be the most effective and apply the best resources. Oops, my apologies. The Crime Severity Index. There have been some questions in the public realm regarding our Crime Severity Index. This is a measure that's done through Stats Canada, and it adds additional weight to specific offenses and uses that and the sentencing to determine the Crime Severity Index. It's closely linked to the criminal code files as well as files that involve violence against persons. We do not have the 2022 stats yet. They will probably be released later this summer. Interestingly, based on the numbers and the anticipated, it looks like it will be less than 2019, which is where we saw a significant number of files. Community safety officers, they'll be approaching their first year anniversary, and they've become a very strong partner with the RCMP detachment, a very good initiative by the city, and we are able to do a bit more of a measured response in terms of having the right resource assisting. If the community safety officers can manage it, fantastic. It allows us to apply our services in other areas. And when they do need additional enforcement, we're there for them as partners. This year, we'll be putting our youth unit will be working in the downtown center on downtown enforcement along with the bike patrol unit. Our community policing, these are volunteers that work in our community and contribute, and as your worship said, it's amazing what these people can do and the effort that they came out. So we had 40 volunteers who logged 971 hours last year. They do patrols in targeted areas that we asked them to, and a significant amount of work in school zones. And this is a great opportunity to feature some of the individuals in action. On our enhanced road safety, here are our stats from last year. We are seeing overall a downward trend on impaired drivers by alcohol, and then having to look at impaired by drug is always a possibility as society shifts in terms of its consumption, but impaired driving has been dropping. Neighborhood community safety audits. Over the last couple of years, 18 communities have been participating in the audit. It's very strong community support, and it's a very effective tool and with cooperation with the VIU criminology program. And a number of their students have gone on to work at the detachment, which is fantastic. Indigenous policing, there were 48 specific patrols and meetings with Snuneymuxw and Snuneymuxw. We have a new Indigenous member, Indigenous policing member, who is working on an outdoor adventure training program at the Quamquam School, and it's fantastic, the program that they've put together. And we have, after a number of years working on it, been able to confirm a community consultative group, which is very positive. And we've had training that was developed by our local elders that's come into the detachment to train all of the watches. So those have been some very positive initiatives this last year. Our youth unit, we have 5 full-time school liaison officers. They made 37 restorative justice referrals. They have planned, in celebration of our 150th anniversary this year, a youth police camp, and I believe it's being held at the Cedar School. It's done in partnership with School District 68, and it's an opportunity to give high school kids a chance to try their hand at policing and participate in a variety of activities. One of the things about our youth program is they're involved in all schools in the community, both private and public. They really are experts in youth. They spend a lot of time working and supporting youth who have potentially been victims of crime, and their skills in bringing that forward are just been instrumental and very effective. The situation table, it started its first referrals as of February of this year, and it is ongoing. We are seeing clients being recognized and then working through the situation table. I've spoken previously about CAR 54. This is the partnership between our detachment and Island Health, where we have a registered nurse in the car alongside a specialized police officer responding to mental health calls. This continues to be a pressure in our community, and it's been a very positive program. We completely covered the car in that photo. Should probably get the car out front. Referrals are definitely generated from literally everywhere. I didn't realize, there we go. As proud as I am about Car 54, I'm as proud of all the skills that the police officers are trained in, so that they have the skills to work with the public in whatever way and state that we meet the public so that we can better help them. And I think sometimes the public isn't always aware of all the courses that we're constantly taking and upgrading and refreshing. And so these are examples of some of the ones that relate to mental health. One of the stats that I want to bring to the awareness is that as we see the mental health apprehensions, that we're actually starting to see a little bit of a decrease in files. And I think that as we're able to find better, more fulsome solutions for individuals, it's meaning that we're not being called with perhaps the same frequency. It's hard to know for sure, but we're definitely seeing a difference. On Saturday, we celebrated our open house. These are, because we had to get the post in, these are pictures from the past one, but it's an example of activities that we had, and it was very well received in the community, and we'll be celebrating a reunion of police officers next month, where individuals are coming back who have been previously serving members here, and we're looking forward to that. And lastly, a couple pictures just celebrating our members and the diversity that they have throughout the community. And that concludes my presentation, unless there's questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Armstrong.
Of course.
I didn't say that, Councillor Armstrong.
Hey, I didn't spend 36 years doing the job without having questions. Thank you. Could you speak about the impact the Jordan decision has had on the release? Because we hear a lot of that from, and probably me, I get more of it having been a former member, that it has on policing, please?
Yeah, the Jordan decision is, and I'm not a lawyer, so forgive me for anyone who knows it better than I do. It speaks to the rights of an accused to have a timely trial. And as well, there are implications on disclosure in that anything that the RCMP provides towards a criminal case, the defendant has equal right to that material. And it's complex to provide all of the information with the investigations, and it can be timely. And the Jordan decision sometimes results in individuals being released without charges, because when the charge is laid is when the clock starts towards the timely court date. And sometimes we see the public not understanding why someone has been released, not recognizing that charges may be forthcoming, and that is ensuring the proper procedural process to ensure a timely trial.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any further questions from council. Superintendent Fletcher, thank you to you and all the members here in Nanaimo. It's a tough job. You're in the front lines of some pretty ugly situations, and I realize it's not easy work. So thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm very proud to represent these guys here.
Next item is committee minutes. We have none. And then motion for adoption of consent items. Moved, Councillor Hemmons. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Eastmere, any discussion on the consent items?
Your Worship, I believe that all three would like to be pulled. Councillors Thorpe and Perino wish to discuss each separately and vote on each separately.
That's fine. Then we'll deal with the first one, which is the draft integrated action plan and draft priority actions. Councillor Thorpe.
If I may, Your Worship, and I'm quite happy to minimize my talking time and speak to all three at once, if I may. So I appreciate being able to revisit this, but I really feel it's necessary for me to once again try and raise the battered flag that I left lying on a stricken field in our last discussion. I have an ongoing concern that when items come through listed as consent items, it implies that there was unanimous consent. And I have to point out that these three items were very much a split vote on council. And while I respect the majority decision of this council and the people that made that decision, I also reserve the right to express my opposition to all three of the items. They relate to draft action plans regarding city plan. City plan. They relate to things like staff reports on ramifications of reducing the use of natural gas, regulating fossil fuels, and an increased education regarding the donut philosophy, which I'm sure viewers will know by now I do not support. So again, I just have to express my concern with these items. I feel, among other reasons, that relating to city plan was meant to be community driven. And the action plans that stem from that should be community driven, and the priorities should be community driven, not something which is added at the last minute because of the values of certain councillors, albeit a majority of council. So that's my concern, and I cannot support these under the consent agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Thank you. Those comments also. I actually was at a meeting with developers in real estate just after this motion passed, and there was a lot of concern expressed, with some saying that's fine, we won't do development here anymore. So I think it's got far-reaching consequences. And secondly, I don't think environment should be a concern of the city overall as one of their arching priorities. We can assist by when BC, the provincial government, comes through with stuff, but I think we need to go back and focus on our core responsibilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers? Councillor Perino?
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, both Councillor Thorpe and Councillor Armstrong said everything that was important about this, but I was surprised too that it was nowhere near a unanimous vote. In fact, in most cases, it was a 5-4 vote, and I too am very much against these particular motions. And so it always concerns me when I see them as a consent item. It wasn't anywhere near consent, so it went through, and that's the way the process works. But I certainly don't support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to comment on this because I think it's important, and when councillors ask that consent items be withdrawn, I think the public should understand what's happening. As Councillor Perino has pointed out, these motions in governance and priorities were not passed unanimously, but quite often consent items just slide through, even though they didn't receive full support, because there's a certain willingness to accept the majority decision of council. My view on these, the first two, if I may, the integrated action plan and draft priority actions, both of them directing staff to prepare information reports, I think will be useful. And I may well not support what the action plans may be at the time, but the majority of council very clearly, I think, supports the concept of information reports, and that's the basis on which decisions should be made. I have been in this council chamber 4.5 years now, and I have seen decisions made without the benefit of staff reports, and I think that's a very troubling process. I'm appreciative of the fact that council chose to ask for information reports in these circumstances. I'm going to support the motions for that matter, but reserving my right. I don't expect to solve the climate crisis here in Nanaimo, and I don't want to be dismissive of what's suggested here, but there are many things we can do that are clearly within our jurisdiction that would assist, including simply planting more trees in our community, which is what was suggested to me by another voter today who sent me an email on the very topic. So on that basis, unless anyone else wishes to speak, we can vote on all three, I think, in the circumstance, Ms. Gray. All those in favor, and those Councillors Eastmere, Gesselbrock, Hemmens, Mayor Krogh, Councillor Brown, Councillor Manley, those opposed, Councillors Armstrong, Thorpe and Perino, motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone. We can now get on to delegations unrelated to agenda items. And the first are Andrea Blakeman, CEO, and Bob Moss, board member of Bolinas Housing Society, respecting potential affordable housing project on Bruce Avenue and 8th Street. Welcome to both of you. If you can just introduce yourself at the mics, just for the record. Although you're not unfamiliar with appearing in front of council, either of you.
Good evening, and thank you, Mayor Crowe.
I know, it's quite the T-shirt if the public could see, yes.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, and members of council for this opportunity to share what we see as an exciting opportunity to add to Nanaimo's stock of affordable housing, and that's the reason for our presentation tonight. So Andrea and I are also joined by 3 of our board members. So David Brooks, our chair, Ed Main, member, and Laura Cross, member. So happy to have them here tonight to share this with you. And we're also joined by our colleagues from Salvation Army, who will introduce themselves more fully shortly. Our T-shirts tonight are not intended to offend or criticize anybody. They are intended to remind all of us that we have to move much faster if we're going to get ahead of the challenges that our city faces. And that's the intention of the message. And one of those major challenges is the lack of housing for those on limited incomes. Samples of those are community members that run our shops, provide services, healthcare providers in many cases, first responders, citizens on limited income, and many more like that. There's a lot of different people who qualify for limited incomes in our community. Bolinas Housing Society, which many of you will know was formerly Nanaimo Affordable Housing Society, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing rental housing for independent individuals and families on low to moderate income. Bolinas was formed in 1990, and over the past 33 years has grown steadily, such that this year we'll have a total of 730 rental units in the city of Nanaimo, making us one of the largest landlords in the community. However, demand is much greater than the current supply, and as many of you know, that demand is increasing quickly. The City of Nanaimo has been a great partner for Bolinas Housing since inception, and we're here tonight to ask for your continued assistance with that. The 5-acre property at 505 8th Street, the corner of 8th and Bruce, is owned by the Salvation Army and has been the site of their community church for 4 decades or so. That community church is ready for some upgrades, and the Salvation Army chose to subdivide the property, it's a 5-acre property, and sell the unused half to raise funds for the upgrades to their church. Unfortunately, the 2021 PLA for that subdivision required roadworks and service upgrades with an estimated cost of $1.7 million. The resulting net proceeds from the sale of the subdivision or subdivided parcel after paying those offsite costs was significantly reduced and therefore made it impractical for Salvation Army to proceed. Bolinas became aware of the proposed site in mid-2022. It's an outstanding site for development of affordable housing, as it is close to schools, parks, neighborhood services, and transportation. In our minds, there couldn't be a better site. So as 2 long-term community service providers, Salvation Army and Bolinas Housing, decide to work together to seek a practical way to reduce the works and services costs, complete the subdivision, and then sell the subdivided half to Bolinas Housing at market value. So working with city staff since...
1 minute, Mr. Moss.
Sorry?
1 minute.
Okay, I'll try and talk faster. So, working with city staff and Cascara Engineering, we have now crafted a compromised scope of work and services which will reduce the cost by approximately $1 million. With the guidance from staff, we have today submitted a development variance permit application which requests that this compromised scope of works and services be incorporated into existing PLA. And with that, I'll quickly turn it over to Andrea.
And I won't get this done in 30 seconds, so perhaps we just go directly to this piece.
Well, Your Worship, if you'll allow us, Salvation Army has allowed us to encroach a little bit on their time.
I'll bend the rules for you tonight.
Thank you.
Ms. Gurry's not giving me the stink eye, so.
Thank you. So the purchase of the subdivided half of this property will allow Bolinas to construct an apartment-style 80 to 100 units, and
Mike,
as well.
A little more, thank you.
Thank you. 80 to 100 units, in addition to other market housing. The intended redevelopment will fit within the existing community plan, which will require rezoning, which we'll apply for in due time as the subdivision proceeds. BC Housing has partnered with Bolinas Housing over many years to help achieve much of the rental stock we have today. We've come to understand that provincial resources are limited. While there's money everywhere, it's not as accessible as one would hope. We have to be a lot more creative if we're gonna get much more done. It's our intention to work with the city, the development community, and our market lenders in order to expedite and reduce the cost of the 8th Street project and future projects. Bob?
Thank you. So we need the city's help to achieve this, a significant addition to the affordable housing stock. The 4 key areas that we ask for your assistance in are agreeing to the reduced scope of works and services as set out in our DVP application. Secondly, contribute to the cost of the reduced scope of, by limiting the total cost to the applicants to $500,000. This would result in approximate cost to the city of about $300,000. Thirdly, expedite the approval of the development permit application and the following rezoning application. This property will have to get rezoned. And finally, to assist with an adjustment to the city's DCC reduction policy for not-for-profit rentals in order to enable us and others to use conventional financing. So we'll have a proposal on that to come forward future, but we will require your assistance with that. So we are keen to get underway with this housing project, and we'll very much appreciate the support of council and staff to bring it to fruition as soon as possible. Andrew and I'd be pleased to answer any questions you may have, but it might be more practical to allow Salvation Army colleagues to present first and then do all the questions afterwards.
All right, we can do that.
Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong, though, you have one now, or do you want to wait?
Yeah, I would like to answer now. You haven't told us what type of housing it will be. Is it 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms? Because we're really missing that family niche. Is that going to be addressed?
This,
Go ahead.
sorry. This would all be family. It would be appropriate for anyone. So 1, 2, 3 bedroom units, that's the whole point of making this a whole community, adding to the community in that area.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Not seeing anyone else for questions for you. If we can get the Salvation Army up. We'll allow them to come back. Let's listen to the Salvation Army. We've only got 3 minutes left as the loquacious remarks of the previous speakers. Good evening, and if you can introduce yourself, thank you.
Yes.
I assume it's Mr. Orsted.
Yes, my name is Derlin Orsted. I'm the Divisional Secretary for Business Administration for the Salvation Army, and Honorable Mayor Kroc and City Councilors, thank you for the opportunity to present. I am with my colleagues, Majors Robin and Yvonne Burrows, the Salvation Army officers here in Nanaimo, and Kim Maddag, our Community Ministries Director. We made a strategic decision a few years ago with this property to invest in the community, and we couldn't do it alone. One of our visions with the Salvation Army in Canada is we are an innovative partner mobilized to share hope where there is hardship, building communities that are just and know the love of Jesus Christ. And in this, mobilizing and partnerships are key. For us, this property has been underutilized for 40 years. I think it started out as to be what we would think as a community hub, a church, community services, and it's really been in the last couple of years that we've taken this on. And part of that was to obviously, because it isn't being used for highest and best use, to sell off a portion of it for a much needed housing in the community. We know that there's a crisis in housing, food insecurity, and many other aspects that are hitting families and individuals hard. I am so grateful for our local team who is really, since this strategic thrust to sell off a subdivided parcel, to really incorporate their community family services aspects in this site. Since September, they've been really planning for and developing their family supports, upstream services to communities, to individuals and families, which has helped prevent loss of housing. It's promoted family and stronger individuals in terms of supports and connections. And so with that support and connecting families and individuals to other services as well, that's going to promote overall health in that local area and increase community success and wellness. So we really are encouraging and promoting personal growth and development, and that's really turning into healthier families. We're seeing the uptake on that. I know I've got 1 minute. We're seeing the uptake on that in that since September, there's been a number of individuals and families who have become connected, who are coming Sundays, but who are also connecting through the programs. We have kids, life skills programs that are developing, adult education and supports, food security, as I mentioned, and tenant supports. So all of these form, and there's many kinds of services under each of those main areas, but all of those form the necessary, we think, resources and tools to help build stronger community. We couldn't do it without the help of Bolinas Housing. We can't do it without the help of the city of Nanaimo. We think that it's key to our success in that area, and again, to have services, a community hub that can be accessed by all in that area. And for sure, having a diverse community and demographic makes sense. Not all upscale housing, but affordable housing makes the most sense for that community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Perino, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And if I could ask Mr. Moss and Ms. Blakeman to come back up, I have a couple of questions. And thank you to the Salvation Army. Thank you very much. Just some questions now. Did I hear that right? That you're talking 80 to 100 homes. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is it one building or more?
It'll be one building for the affordable section.
Okay.
There's also an intention to perhaps build some market rental housing in behind if we can make that fit.
Make the space?
Piece.
Okay, and there's no connection other than the obvious excellent working connection with the Salvation Army. You're not connected directly with them. They're two different organizations. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the extra, if there's any extra money made, what do you do with it? In other words, I'd had a comment, I should back up a bit, I apologize. I'd had a comment said to me that both organizations have got all sorts of money, and you do have, you know, what do we say, 730 apartments. Yeah, that you're flush with money. This was a comment that had been said to
I
me.
haven't seen their books, but I've seen ours. I assure you that's not the case.
Well, it was a very interesting statement to me because, you know, you think with 730 apartments, obviously you're doing very well, but the truth is, what do you do with any extra money that you do have?
Well, I think the key thing is that we're a not-for-profit society, And the challenge we have is in figuring out how to finance new additions to our portfolio. Because we compete with private sector development for property, and of course we're paying construction costs based on what the market costs are today. It's very difficult to build affordable housing. And so there's no excess money. In fact, we struggle to keep enough money aside for future requirements.
Excellent. And that's actually, I fed that question to you because I knew that's what you would say, and I want you to put every single penny into the next development. That's what I want you to do.
May I extrapolate just a tiny bit?
Sure.
So the oversight as a nonprofit and a charity from CRA, BC Housing, is extraordinary. It is nothing like a for-profit business. I would challenge, and many of our board members they've seen our books, they're mostly business owners. I think you could sit down with them, any one of them, at any time, and they'll share exactly how challenging it is.
Well, you're doing a fantastic job, and I think you should be at the property right now putting a shovel in the ground as far as I'm concerned. So if you can get this going, how long does the build take?
Well, the actual build itself, I mean, conceivably, we could do that in 18 months once we had everything ready to go.
I just find this, I'll just end by saying thank you so much to both organizations. I thought that was terrific. And this is an exciting project, and I'm so glad you're here because what you do for our residents that are in need is outstanding. And 730 isn't bad. Get to work, we need 3 times that. So I just celebrate what you do. Thank you so much, and we'll obviously be talking about it. Thank you.
Thank you. In order, Councillors Hemmens, Brown, and Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much for your presentation. I love it when organizations come to us with very clear asks. So I've heard you say that you would like us to reduce the scope of works required, limit the total cost to $500,000, expedite permit approval processes, and the fourth one was, I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
Sorry, the fourth one was to slightly modify the program for DCC credits for not-for-profits so that it makes it more practical to use private lenders. Right now, there is a lifelong covenant registered on the property that makes it continue to be used for nonprofit housing. Lenders might not like that, and many conventional lenders don't like that. So we need to find a way to limit it to perhaps a 10-year covenant with some provisos, and that's what we've been working with staff with.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And if I may, a follow-up question. So it's regarding the expediting the permit approval processes. And Mr. Moss, I'm looking at you because you're a local businessman. You have local business folks on your board. If the ask is to expedite permit approval processes for this project, are you asking the city to expedite permit approval processes for all affordable housing? Well, and if that is indeed the case, do we stop at affordable housing? Do we expedite permit approval processes for medical clinics, for daycares, for, like, where you can see where I'm going with this. I'm asking you to kind of reflect on, if we do this for you, is it just you? Is there a line in the sand that we need to pay attention to from a business perspective?
Well, certainly we would appreciate it for our process, but I think overall there's a big need for us to, as a city, find a way to reduce approval processes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks so much for both the delegations, much appreciated. In the spirit of LGSD, I'm just trying to, the acronym, I'm not going to read it out, but I'm trying to understand the ask completely as well. So I think I understand the 3, but there's, the limiting funds is essentially, the way I don't understand it is to put in funds from the city for the works and services. So I think the other ones more or less have avenues forward, but I'm not clear on the exact dollar amount asked for the city in terms of the limiting the costs to for the works and services.
I'll do my best to explain that. So the latest proposal that we've provided with the DVP is for a modified road section along 8th Street, and the best estimate of cost from Cascara for that that total modified section is about $800,000, which, by the way, includes a 40% contingency. So we're asking that the city absorb or pay for about $300,000 of that. Obviously, it'll be, if we can do it for less, so much the better. But the idea is to limit the total cost to Salvation Army, in this case, to $500,000.
Okay, follow up if I may, Your Worship. Does that request come in front of council through that application, or is that a separate process?
I believe it is part of the rationale that we've provided with the development variance permit. So yes, it will come as part of that, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you to the presenters. Some of my questions have already been answered, so I just look forward to seeing the official ask, and I know our staff are well aware of the need to get more affordable housing built in the community, and I'm sure that they'll be focusing their attention on this project as much as they can. So appreciate the presentation, and looking forward to seeing the formal rezoning and development permit process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Perino, conscious of the time?
Conscious of the time, thank you, Your Worship. I'll just make the comment that, we are so limited at this table as to what we can do to support business and development, and the list goes on and on and on, and the cost of doing everything is enormous. But the fact of the matter is that when it comes to affordable housing options, this is an organization that has proven real success. And if there's one area that I think that we should support as much as we can, is those organizations that have proven success with 730, and they're about to put another 100 families into homes. And this is an area that, we can't make motions tonight, but I want to bring this forward so that we can talk about it with staff, because this is an opportunity that I don't think we should walk away from, and this is where we can put good money to good use. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the three presenters tonight and others who attended. Much appreciated.
Thank you all.
The next item is reports, parks, recreation, and culture fees and charges. Mr. Harding, good evening. Welcome.
Thank you, Worship. It's our third time in front of council. Tonight we get to bring to you the actual bylaws to update our Parks, Recreation, and Culture fees and charges, which we haven't updated since 2015. Ms. Gonzalez and Mr. Johnson are here to answer any questions you may have, and so is myself. So if there's any questions, we'd be pleased to answer, but we're looking for first three readings of the bylaw. Again, our goal is to get the bylaw in place, and so new fees would come into effect September 1st of this year.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harding. As you pointed out, Council has had several occasions to review this and consider its position on it. I'm not seeing any questions for you. Councillor Gesselbrock?
I would like to move that the fees and charges bylaw 2023 number 7336.04, a bylaw to incorporate the new parks, recreation, and culture classification system and price structure, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock?
I'd like to move that the fees and charges bylaw 2023 number 7336.04 pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Perino. Any discussion?
Yes.
Councillor Thorpe?
Thank you, Your Worship. Very quickly, I certainly support this. And as Mr. Harding points out, it's been 8 years since these fees and charges were reviewed. We on council have had very little pushback from the sports groups in town on this, and I personally feel that the increases are very moderate and reasonable, so I see no reason not to support them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thorpe. We have an exceptional park system in this community, and asking for a tiny bit more funds to support it appropriately, I think, is absolutely dead on. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Move that fees and charges bylaw 2023, number 7336.04, pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. The next, Mr. Harding, thanks very much. The next is development permit DP 1290-1861 East Wellington Road. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Your Worship. As you mentioned, a development permit application for Council's consideration this evening. I'm sure Council is familiar with this property, as it is a city-owned property that was purchased by the city a couple of years ago now and subsequently leased to Loaves and Fishes. They're asking for your support this evening in a form and character development permit in order to construct the warehouse on the subject property. There are a couple of variances which I would note. They're outlined in the report. There's a small height variance of 0.5 meters, so the building height will go from 14 to 14.5, and a couple of smaller variances related to landscaping locations and setbacks in, related to landscaping. So happy to take any questions, Your Worship.
Well, I think everyone's had a chance to review the material. No questions for Mr. Lindsay. Someone care to make a recommended motion? Moved Councillor Armstrong, seconded Councillor Gesselbrock. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. The next, Mr. Lindsay again, this time development permit application number DP 1262-921 Terminal Avenue North.
Thank you, Worship. This is a small infill project. As you mentioned, the property does have an address on Terminal Avenue, but it also is a through property with frontage onto Cypress. So the application, and maybe I'll ask that attachment D be brought up, which actually shows the building elevations. There are a number of variances. Like I mentioned, this is an infill project on a somewhat unique property, as being a property, a through lot that has two frontages. But just also the nature of the property does require some variances in order to make this project work. So first of all, we have a variance from Terminal Avenue from 6 meters to 1 meter, so it's a 5-meter variance. One of the side yard setbacks is a variance from 3 meters to 1.5 meters. We are looking for a variance or support for a variance to reduce the number of, or increase the number of small cars that are allowed from 40% to 50%. So that'll make the difference of one additional on-site small parking stall. And as I mentioned, as this is a through lot, our bylaw requires parking behind the front face of the building, but as this building has two faces, it makes it difficult. So there's actually a variance to the parking on the site. Happy to take any questions you want.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lindsay. I'm not seeing any questions. Councillor Armstrong moves the motion. Seconded Councillor Eastmere. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. Housing Agreement 2345 Kenworth Road. Again, Mr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe this project may be familiar to Council because it's recently went through both rezoning and development permits, but we're here this evening to ask your support in the registration of a housing agreement and the associated first 3 readings of that bylaw. So under our development cost charge bylaw, affordable housing projects are eligible for a 50% reduction in DCCs, subject to meeting a number of criteria. One of those criteria is that the affordable housing term is actually secured through a housing agreement, which would be registered on title and run with the land. So in this case, the project will be eligible, it does meet the criteria, and we're recommending that Council consider first 3 readings to the bylaw this evening. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any questions for Mr. Lindsay. Councillor Gesselbrock, please.
Move that housing agreement bylaw 2023 number 7363 to secure unit affordability pass first reading.
Seconded Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Move that housing agreement bylaw 2023 number 7363 pass second reading.
Seconded Councillor Perino. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Move that council direct staff to register a covenant on the title of the land to reinforce the terms of the housing.
Sorry, third reading.
Ooh. Move that Housing Agreement Bylaw 2023, number 7363, pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Move that council direct staff to register a covenant on the title of the land to reinforce the terms of the housing agreement.
Seconded, Councillor Perino. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. The next are bylaws. Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2021, number 4500.190. Councillor Gesselbrock.
I'd like to move that the Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2021, number 4500.190, to rezone 608 Sandy Court from single dwelling residential R1 to 3 and 4 unit residential R5 be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. We're on to notices of motion. We have none for tonight, but we are on to other business now. And the first up is Councillor Eastmere, motion re the city's vandalism relief grant fund. Councillor Eastmere.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. So the motion is for staff to prepare a report to council on options to expand funding to the vandalism relief grant fund, and that the grant program be amended to allow businesses to apply more than the current rule of twice per year, and to each time receive up to a maximum of $2,500 and have an annual cap of $5,000. I'm bringing this forward earlier than we were planning to. Thank you.
Second it for discussion.
Thank you so much.
If we might, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Proceed.
Yeah, I appreciate it being the first real motion that I've brought forward, so thanks for going easy on me. But there was a plan for council to look at this again in October, so we're a little bit ahead of schedule re-examining this vandalism relief grant, but I've noticed that we've had several incidents where the same business has been hit more than twice, and it's not happening a lot, but it's enough that the chamber, which is overseeing the grant fund for us, has already made one exception and allowed a business to access it more than twice per year. And I think that it would be nice to have council's backing on that change. And of course, businesses that I've spoken to have been supportive of this. Obviously, it's a really tangible way that we can help the vandalism and window breakage issue. And the more that we have businesses with windows boarded up for lengthy periods of time, the worse it looks, and it's a waterfall of negative impacts from that. So it's a small change, and I initially brought this forward wondering if we could put that $75,000 that the province committed to expanding the Downtown Safety Action Plan. I thought this might be a good place to put that money. So that's why there's the first part about looking at options to expand it. Whether or not we can actually use that $75,000 for this use is a separate question, but I would hope that could be potentially something that we would look at.
Thank you very much. In order, Councillors Armstrong, Perino, and Thorpe.
Thank you. My concern still remains that we're only doing this for the downtown businesses. I saw a business up on Dover Road that had to shut down because of all the vandalism, so they've actually just gone out of business because they can't afford it. So I think it's grossly unfair, as I've said before, that we're only looking after downtown businesses and not the rest of the city who's going through the same type of vandalism. So unless it extends to all of city businesses, I'm not going to be able to support. I do appreciate the fact of the $75,000, which is meant for downtown. Have no issue with that. But I'm very concerned that once again, and I hear from many businesses that we're favoring downtown over them, and I think we need to expand this program to all businesses, not just one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship. And my question through you, possibly to staff, is, so we don't know whether or not we can use the $75,000 that we got for this program, or do we know whether or not we can?
Your worship, the original understanding is the original intent of the 75,000 was to do things like community safety plans.
Okay.
In our discussions at a staff level with the province, they recognize that council's already done work on the downtown, and you've also done your youth resiliency strategy, which you recently endorsed. A lot of work on kind of that end. So they have told us that there may be some flexibility in using that funds, but we're still trying to get some clarity on that. So if this is adopted, we'll look at options. If there's a need for expanded funding, we would look at options, and if that's available, we would bring that back.
Okay, thank you. And a second question, if I may. So when this happens to a business owner, it has to be reported to the police so that an investigation is started. Is that correct, for them to receive the money, or receive any money? Is that correct? They don't? So is there any concern about that? Is there a fear that it might be...
That's certainly not a requirement of the criteria that council adopted.
Okay.
Unless it's something additional that the chamber is asking as part of their application. I'm not aware of that, but it's not been an issue to my knowledge. But if we're going to review the program, like I think Councillor Eastmere mentioned, we were kind of anticipating to review it a year after implementation. But if we're going to review this now, it's something we could certainly look at.
And Your Worship, a comment. I agree with Councillor Armstrong that, you know, it's a good program, but it should be citywide. And if there was some way that we could do that, I'd certainly be much more in support. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I support the intent of this motion, but I also agree with the comments expressed by Councillors Perino and Armstrong regarding maybe expanding it. To me, my first reaction when I read this was that surely this should be part of our 2024 budget discussions, and maybe a larger discussion regarding this entire program and the extent of it and the funding of it. So I'm really torn at this point. I realize that we're just asking for a staff report, but I just wonder if that's a good use of staff time now as opposed to during the coming budget process. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am in support. I'd like to see a report from staff. I'd like to know what money has been used up. Some of these businesses downtown have been hit multiple times. I'm also curious about other parts of town, you know, what the vandalism levels are in other parts of town. But I do know that in our downtown core, we've had businesses that haven't had a problem with vandalism over the 10, 15 years that they've been operating. And then all of a sudden they're dealing with multiple window break-ins and break-ins in short period of time. So I'd like to know, you know, how this fund has been used so far, whether there's need for it in other parts of the community, and so I'm interested in seeing a report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons and Councillor Eastmere, then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. Full support of this motion, and thank Councillor Eastmere for bringing this forward. I understand this was born of conversation with local business owners. To Councillor Armstrong's points, I believe that the expansion of the program is going to be brought to us in October with that fuller review. If I could have staff assurance, that would be great. But in the meantime, I think this is a really practical way to support businesses that are being hit again and again. So absolutely interested in seeing expanded. I believe that that was something we were going to look at in future once we saw how this was working downtown. As we await that information, I think this is a really great option to support local business. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you. Yes, to the point of whether we look at expanding it now, I'm certainly open to that. In talking to the chamber about it, it gets a little bit complicated because you have businesses that are part of like shopping centers or like strip malls, and then who owns those businesses, that piece sort of gets a little bit complicated. And I think when the program was originally brought in, the thinking was we're focusing on downtown because they have a DNBIA, and there was a way of like administering this vandalism relief grant. But now that it's held by the chamber, I think potentially there would be more flexibility to expand the program. But just how we deal with those businesses that are, you know, part of larger shopping areas might be tricky. But appreciate you raising that.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm going to support the motion as is. I think, well, this motion speaks to expanding, and I'm actually quite interested in actually seeing how much the program has been utilized. Hopefully there's some data on to what type of items. And I think that's important because I want to have a good sense of that before we start talking about what expansion might look like citywide, because, you know, we could find out that, you know, this program is being accessed to such a degree that as much as we may want to expand it citywide, it's just not possible. So for that reason, I think from some of the information that if this report came back to council, we'd be able to sort of have a better idea of how we might want to triangulate how we move forward with respect to some of those goals citywide and both downtown. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm going to rely on the simple wording of the motion myself. It says that staff prepare a report back to council with options to expand funding to the Vandalism Relief Grant Fund and that the grant program be amended, etc. So unless I'm seeing any other speakers, I think what the concerns that have been raised will be covered by the report in any event. So all those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. The next is Councillors Brown and Manley, Motion Redevelopment Corporations. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. I hope Councillor Manley will second these two motions. I'll move them.
Very good.
I'll quickly introduce them. I know people have been having different discussions with different members of the community around development corporations. I know Councillor Manley and I have had these, and I know His Worship and I have had it with some prominent community members at times as well. So really, there is benefit, you know, there is known benefits to development corporations. There's also examples where they haven't worked so well. And both these taken together are really to ask staff to do that research, take that discussion that's maybe been happening at different community tables with different sets of information, having a common foundation in which we can all have that discussion together and decide if that's something that we may wish to explore for the city of Nanaimo. It could be a benefit to different aspects of our community when we're talking about affordable housing, when we're talking about downtown revitalization, when we're talking about the ability to kind of bring together private industry, the benefits of private industry, but also the benefits that government and local government can bring to the development process. So like I said, there is known advantages. There's also known pitfalls. And I think council would really benefit from this discussion at this table in light of some of the challenges. But in order to have a healthy and robust discussion, I think we all need to have that same information and utilize staff to bring some of that forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Manley, then Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm obviously seconding this, and I'm interested in the information. I've had some of those meetings and heard some very interesting projects, including the Winnipeg rail yards and North Vancouver, the Lonsdale Quay, and other areas where this has been successful. And I'm happy to hear that Mr. Rudolph, our current CAO, has some experience with this and knowledge to share. And so I'm looking forward to hopefully having this motion passed so that we can get a report and get further information about how a development corporation might benefit the city of Nanaimo. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm inclined to support this. I do have a couple of hesitations. I will need to be convinced that the city would benefit by getting into the development business. But I note that it's taken us over 4 years to finally reestablish the Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation. And I don't want to see anything done which is going to undercut that work. So I'd be interested in how a development corporation might work as some type of adjunct of the Prosperity Corporation. I have a couple of concerns with the second motion or part of the motion. First one is that this is going to be a fairly substantive staff report, I think, which I would be interested in reading. But the date of July seems to me a pretty short timeline, and it implies that this would be a priority over possibly other things. So that concerns me. And second, the phrase that topic matter experts be invited to provide information. That to me implies people that are strongly supportive of this concept would come and sort of pitch the idea. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in an unbiased pro and con analysis. So those are concerns that I have with number 2, but I'm curious to see how other councillors feel about this. And on the whole, I think I would be, as I say, supportive of getting at least a staff report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown again.
Yeah, thanks. When we had talked about submitting and when we got submitting, and just due to the process, it definitely added, over 4 weeks. So my apologies. We originally were sort of targeting 3.5 months. That by the time it went through just where it fell on dates. So I say that because I think the real intention here is to have this information just be, in advance of going into the 2024 budget deliberations, because it is a significant one. The idea around topic matter experts definitely wasn't to stack the deck at all. It's to, so for example, the Prosperity Corp, right? They may have an interest in it, they may not, they may have a strong opinion about it. It would really be, the idea there is to solicit feedback that would be beneficial for council's deliberations, not to say, and I'm trying, as much as I know development corporations have worked, in some places I also know that they have not fulfilled their promise in others. And the last thing I'd want us to do is to go down a path that had a high likelihood of failure because it wasn't going into something eyes wide open.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. So I'm hearing you're not stuck in stone in July, is that correct? So I just would like to hear from either Mr. Lindsay or Mr. Corson as to what their time frame is and what their priorities, if they have to change some of their priorities to do this. Thank you.
Mr. Corson.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. July would probably be a bit challenging. We'd likely be hiring a consultant to help us with this. So we'd have to get them on board, go through procurement. So I think the fall is probably a better likelihood of getting that to you. So maybe September, October.
Councillor Brown, I'm going to guess is going to make a motion to amend his motion.
Just to follow up, what would the budget be for a consultant, since I don't see any stuff attached to it? Thank you.
Yeah, through Your Worship, probably in the $25,000 to $50,000 range.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown. It's very slow.
Mine feels slower, but that could also be up here. I would move an amendment that instead of July, it references prior to 2024 budget deliberations.
Sorry.
That instead of July, that the second portion of the motion be amended to read prior to the 2024 budget deliberations.
Thank you. And there's a seconder, Councillor Manley. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. We're now dealing with the amended motion. I just throw out this word of caution. A wise person reminded me today that we are potentially embarking on a very ambitious capital plan. The Nanaimo Operations Center, the walkway, South End Community Facility, et cetera, and so I'm very pleased to see that it includes the wording "their purpose" and governance structures, because I think we need to consider very carefully what we can bring to the table, because we've been told many times we don't have much land, so it's not like we can put land down on the table, and we've had that discussion before around the value of properties that we do have. And so if we can't bring land to the table, we have to bring money. We got to bring something. It's either land or money. And if we have a number of serious and important projects that are necessary to the operations of the city, then we need to consider that. I'll leave it at that. I'm going to support it. Seeing no further speakers, all those in favor? And any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is Councillor Thorpe, motion re-controlled use of substances in public spaces. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. When my microphone comes on, I will. Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I'd like to move that Council direct staff to prepare a report on options to regulate the use of controlled substances in public spaces, including a summary of steps being proposed in other British Columbia communities following provincial decriminalization.
Seconded, Councillor Perino.
Yes, Your Worship, there is a delegation
Yes.
that was scheduled.
Yes. Yes.
So you'll hear from her before you vote.
Good evening, Ms. Lovegrove. You can introduce yourself for the record, please.
I'm just gonna wait. My name's Sarah Lovegrove. Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name's Sarah Lovegrove. I'm a registered nurse, educator, and co-chair of the Nanaimo Community Action Team. I'm grateful to be present with you today on the traditional unceded territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation, and for the opportunity to offer education to Council and through you, the public, regarding one of the most profoundly tragic public health crises of our time. In the past 15 months alone, Nanaimo has lost over 113 community members to a toxic supply of drugs. The evidence of a racist colonial war on drugs permeates through this crisis, as First Nations populations are disproportionately impacted, dying at over 5 times the rate of other BC residents. And because of stigma and the risk of penalty, 78% are dying alone inside their homes. I'm only given 5 minutes, so. Yeah. The ripple effects of this crisis also means that for every life lost, there are family, friends, and community members that are deeply and tragically impacted. The decriminalization of people who possess certain drugs serves to reduce the barriers and stigma that prevent people from accessing life-saving services. The issue at hand with this motion today is that substance use is a public health issue, not an issue that can be regulated or decided by municipal authorities. Whether through criminal or administrative sanctions, punitive approaches to substance use are proven to be both ineffective and drive health and safety harms for people who use drugs. Public health issues, including substance use, are a matter of provincial interest. For this reason, local governments cannot pass bylaws that impact public health unless certain conditions of the Community Charter and public health bylaws regulations are met. For instance, a bylaw that restricts or has the potential to restrict an individual's access to health services or that may impact health will require a Minister of Health's approval. The Supreme Court of Canada has also found that in some cases, issuing fines to people who cannot pay them amounts to cruel and unusual punishment under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So in our current housing crisis, a limited availability of shelter, detox, and treatment beds, and only one limited capacity safe consumption site in a community as land-sprawled as ours, it begs the question, where are people supposed to go to consume substances safely? Regulating or penalizing substances use mimics the harms of criminalization by driving people to accessing substances from an illicit market and forces people further into isolation. As evidenced by the increasing number of deaths occurring indoors, we know that using alone is deadly, but it also further exposes individuals to the complex health impacts of consuming drugs contaminated with potent opioids, benzodiazepines, and tranquilizers. Attempting to regulate substance use in any way circumvents the intention of provincial decrim to reduce the stigma that limits accessibility of healthcare services. When people are staying in the hospital, for example, the risk of penalty and stigma increases the risk of them leaving before they're receiving the care they need, which also then imposes a high degree of moral distress on those providing care. People who use alone also experience a myriad of complex health complications in addition to the risk of early death. Healthcare providers such as myself are seeing increased incidence of hypoxic brain injury, chronic wounds, harder to treat infections, an increase in critical care admissions, and even surgical interventions for the amputation of extremities. All of these health-related factors increase the cost and strain on hospitals, healthcare services, and on the people who provide care. So before anything else, I want to recognize the extreme state of our community, the experiences and visibility of trauma, poverty, and systemic oppression, the impact on families, perception of safety, and the difficulty we are having moving forward in this state of complex crisis, but we are not going to police, regulate, or enforce our way out of this. To find actual solutions, we need an entirely new approach. So rather than limiting the scope of this motion to the regulation of substances
1 minute.
likely in relationship to the establishment of some sort of bylaw or penalty to the people who use substances, I would like to invite council to reframe the existing motion to direct staff to explore solutions with a new approach. A reasonable option to consider to minimize public consumption is to have the city collaborate with Island Health to identify and designate spaces across the community that would increase accessibility of safe consumption and drug checking services. With stigma being a primary barrier to keeping people alive, council could mandate and support staff to re-engage with the community action team and become educated about overdose awareness, including training on how to administer naloxone. Finally, to make any of these solutions a reality, we need the immediate implementation of safe and secure housing solutions for all, with an emphasis on establishing substance use-friendly housing initiatives with wraparound supports for complex care needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right on time. Questions for Ms. Lovegrove? Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, thank you. And I'm sorry, I needed to go slower so I could hear it.
I only have 5 minutes, so.
I know, you did fine. You did just fine. It is, I think from my perspective, and the reason why I think that this motion is important is because we want to limit people using outside in public view. So just like not allowing people to smoke in places, it's that same sort of theory. They can't take alcohol, even alcoholics can't take alcohol and drink out in the open. That's what we're trying to limit, because it's so difficult for people, for others, especially with children, that kind of thing. It is difficult. Having said that, I understand this problem a lot more than I would care to admit, and I realize it's so complicated. We're never going to find an answer. But the truth is that we're trying to at least make everyone else feel as though we're doing something on the other side to protect them as well. And that's where I was coming from. So, but thank you for your presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Perino. Any other questions for Ms. Lovegrove? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. And Councillor Thorpe, you want to speak to the motion, please.
Yes, I will, Your Worship. Thank you very much. And through you, I'd first like to thank Ms. Lovegrove for giving time tonight to come and care enough to be here and present your perspective, which I appreciate. But if I may, Your Worship, I'll give my other side of the coin rationale for my motion, and it's this, and I've got some points I'd like to make. Since drugs were decriminalized in BC earlier this year, we have had constant concerns and complaints from our citizens about open drug use and discarded drug paraphernalia in public places. So my motion is not about targeting people, it's about targeting behavior, which is concerning, very concerning to our citizens. We want people to feel comfortable walking on downtown streets or being in public parks and squares, not have to be confronted with the open use of drugs or the resulting paraphernalia. As Councillor Perino just alluded to, we do not allow smoking in public places or drinking in parks and playgrounds, but now apparently it's okay to do drugs, and that just does not make sense to me. So Kamloops has passed a nuisance bylaw banning illicit drug use within 100 meters of municipal parks and playgrounds and on any sidewalk. High-use zones in places frequented by children, families, and tourists. Sicamous and Penticton, have passed or are considering similar measures, and I believe Ladysmith, closer to home, is also looking at it. Drug consumption would be banned in places where it would negatively interfere with the public's use and enjoyment of such places, and that, I think, is important. A bylaw would not only protect our citizens and enhance a feeling of public safety, but it would also give enforcement officers the ability to talk to people and point them toward the necessary resources they need. I think this is what our citizens and our tax-paying public and our business community want, and I think we need to try and take some action. So at this point, I am not proposing a bylaw, though I may do so in future based on the information that I receive if this motion passes. But I am looking for options and advice on options. I'll just point out in closing, Your Worship, that even our Premier has acknowledged that something has to be done about this situation. And the opposition leader has said that he 100% supports municipalities that want to protect their children and communities by creating bylaws prohibiting open drug use in parks and other public spaces. So again, I'm looking for options. I think we need to do something, and I think the public expects us to be trying to do something and look for some solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong and then Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. I'll be in support of this, and thank you, Ms. Lovegrove. I would tell you to look at Portland, where they will show you there has been a significant increase in drug use since decriminalization, so there are stats to support that. But I do have the same concerns that I can't go after a baseball game and have a drink, but I can have a line of Coke, or I can do a shot, smoke up some meth. Children are right beside, they're inhaling that as well. So I'm very concerned about that. We've seen kids go to hospital because of needle pricks. Some are going through the AIDS cocktail because they don't know the status of the infected needles. So I think we have to do something to also protect our most vulnerable, being kids and older people that are no longer feeling safe to use our parks, or even the drugs that were found in our school grounds the other day. Luckily that some child didn't digest. So I'm in support of this. It's just a report. It's not a bylaw. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to support this because I think we need to debate it. And I think having an information report is going to allow us to debate it from the place of having all of the same information, so we're not hearing about stats from Oregon and what Ladysmith might be doing. I'd like staff to bring us a really good, fulsome report that includes options that we can fully debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, then Manley, then Eastmere.
Thanks, Your Worship. I almost want to support this because I think it might be Councillor Thorpe's first notice of motion since I've been on council with him, and I love notice of motions. But yeah, but no, I'm not going to be able to support this. I think there's a variety of reasons, and if we did have that robust debate, that would be the time and place I would want to bring that forward. But I do note, like, we have bylaw 7628 that it speaks to smoking, but smoking of any particular type of substance, cannabis, tobacco, and it has these very similar provisions. It's based on the same portion of the charter that the Kamloops bylaw, and the one in Campbell River has now since been modeled after their failure of the first. It clearly wasn't working, right? If it is meant to prohibit, it does not, and the mechanism that we really have to enforce such bylaws are either ticketing or RCMP powers, and the whole point of decriminalization was to not have RCMP be spending their resources on that. And often the folks that we would be ticketing, the life circumstance doesn't really permit them to pay such a ticket. And so, I think, like I said, I could go into a whole bunch of other reasons, but I think the practicalities of it, based on the existing bylaws, I've got kids, I've got in parks, I see the paraphernalia of those that choose to smoke rather than inject all the time. Clearly the existing bylaw meant for targeted at that isn't working. So for those reasons, the practical reasons, but then a whole host of other, I think, more ideological and philosophical reasons, I can't support this. Yeah, leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the intent of this motion. It's difficult to see people openly using drugs in our streets. And the decriminalization without treatment facilities is a failure. We're supposed to be having a four-pillared approach to drug addiction, and treatment is one of those pillars. And when people have to wait, long periods of time to be able to get into treatment is just unacceptable. We've decriminalized drugs, but we do not have a safe supply. We have organized crime that are still regulating the supply of drugs. The supply is toxic. People have to engage in criminal activity to be able to, or find lots of money, blow through their savings, whatever it is, in order to support their habits. the people that we're seeing on the street that are openly using drugs are homeless. And that means that we need to provide somewhere for them to use drugs, because otherwise we're driving them into the bushes, and that is where they will die. And that is where the accelerants that they use as they're using drugs will set forest fires in Bowen Park and other parks in our community, because we're driving them into the forest to do this. And it's not safe in there. Just this weekend, somebody, a very vulnerable person at the shelter, was pulverized with a rock and ended up in the hospital with 18 stitches because they were using in a place that wasn't public and safe. And we know the statistics that the majority of people that are dying are using at home. And decriminalization has not reduced stigma. It has not, because people that don't want to be associated as drug users with the homeless are not going to be using in places where they can get the help that they need. They're still using at home, and those are generally men between the ages of 25 and 50 who have had injuries and become addicted to opioids through prescriptions. This is a public health issue, and it's also about constitutional rights. And if Mr. LeBerge was here, I would ask him what his thoughts are right now. I mean, we had an email exchange about people drinking openly in public in our community, and I sent him an email about that. Why aren't they rounded up like we round up people on bathtub days and put them in the drunk tank? And if you read the response, it was the response I was expecting, because they're homeless people, because most of them are indigenous, and because there's the Gladue reference that we have to be thinking about, and the fact that people can't pay fines, and that we got to stop pushing people around. So I want to know, if we're going to say that people can't use drugs in public, where are they going to use those drugs? The people that have addictions in our community that are homeless, where are they going to use drugs? We declared Nandu a nuisance property and they shut down. Where would we like to see Nandu operate in this community? Where do we want to see people be able to, homeless people, be able to use drugs safely? That's the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eastermere, then Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you. I really struggle with this because it's definitely something that we're hearing a lot about from community members, and we're witnessing like open drug use in ways that I've personally not witnessed, and it's really disturbing for sure. And I just, we need the province to step up and to treat this crisis like the crisis that it is. And they've thrown us in the deep end with no water wings right now, with decriminalization and no safe supply, and the treatment beds they're announcing are like 10 at a time. It's not okay. So I really want to turn this back on the province and say, what are you going to do to make this tenable for BC municipalities? And I don't think this is the right time for Nanaimo to go out on its own and try to make some kind of piecemeal bylaw to address this, because all it's going to do is push people further out of the public eye, and as Councillor Manley said, that's when they die. And our numbers are already untenable. And really what sealed it for me was our Director of Bylaw Services, Dave LeBerge's email on Friday, and right in it he says, enforcement of provincial regulations against public intoxication and alcohol consumption is not effective in deterring unhoused substance-addicted persons from repeating similar behavior, nor does incarceration or fines deter habitual drunkenness or alcohol addiction, and by extension, drug use. So our own Director of Bylaw Services is saying this isn't going to work, because the people who are using in public, they have nowhere else to go. So I can't see this being a good use of staff time right now, and I don't want us walking down this path. It's not the way. So I can't support it.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrook.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just on the motion, on the surface, you know, why are folks allowed to, inject opioids or smoke opioids or do methamphetamines on the side of the road, and we're not allowed to be drinking alcohol? And in the face of the situation where we have a lot of people that are homeless, that are drug addicted, that are, their lives are in peril, and the disturbance that caused, I think a lot of people are searching for solution of how can we make disappear this situation that has gotten so out of control. And on the surface level, a motion like this to not allow it in public spaces feels like, maybe there's something that we can do and we can take a stand against this deregulation or decriminalization of drug use that is now a provincial rule. And unfortunately, I think that the situation is so bad, and that when you look at the practicality of a bylaw officer going up and writing somebody who's homeless on the side of the road, injecting into their arm or smoking, that person isn't going to pay a fine. They're not going to give a lick of a difference whether they're giving you a $200 fine or a $1,000 fine. And where are you going to move them? We've had this problem for long time now, 6-7 years, and it's still a 3-week wait to get into drug detox. That's a joke. Our response to this has been a joke. The treatment facilities that are available, try waiting for 2 months to get into treatment. That's a joke for the scale of this issue. And now we're debating whether to, what to do with these people using city resources or their bylaw officers providing tickets. And I think that's the cruelest provincial download in response to a provincial download that I've seen. And I think that this issue is a huge crisis, and we need to really be speaking up strongly, which we have been, and getting the province to actually invest in the proper medical interventions and supports for folks in the housing to make a crack in it. And it's not going to be our bylaw officers giving tickets or moving people along. We actually do have a community safety bylaw team that does go around if there are public disturbances in the downtown area and helping people move along. But that's not what's needed. And I think that Campbell River has tried this response. It's just, everybody realizes it's not going to be an effective response. And so I think that we need to speak up. I think that the provincial decriminalization is putting the cart way, way before the horse. When there isn't the proper detox facilities, there's not even the proper areas for people to use drug spaces, public inhalation sites. There's not even the resources to be able to do that. And so I just think that this is a muddled mess, and this is, I appreciate the attempt to try to figure out some solution to that, but until we have a very large plan on training staff that can be able to provide the proper services to provide the medical support for individuals, and that we've, figuring out the staffing shortages for building more affordable housing and finding places to do that, anything else is not going to make a lick of a difference. So I unfortunately can't support this, although on the surface level, it sucks walking down Old Victoria and there's people doing the homeless count. I remember, doing a survey with somebody, and right beside them there's somebody smoking, I don't know what, wafting in my thing, and I felt a little lightheaded. I don't know exactly thing, but that is frightening, and it's scary how far things have gotten. And we need to take this very seriously, and unfortunately I don't think this is the level of what we need to be addressing this situation at. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe, Armstrong, and Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the comments of other councillors, whatever their viewpoint. This is a huge topic, but I'm not aiming tonight to debate decriminalization or to debate the need for treatment centers or anything else, and this is not targeting homeless people. There are lots of persons with homes and expensive homes that now feel quite free, as they are allowed to use drugs and have their paraphernalia in public places like parks and playgrounds. And I don't think that's right. I don't think it's fair to our citizens or our children or our grandchildren. So yes, the province needs to do something, and we need to pressure them to do something. The Premier has admitted that this decriminalization has had unforeseen fallout and results, but we can't wait for them. All I'm asking is a staff report on what options do we have to help make our streets safer for our citizens. And we've had examples in past council meetings of citizens who've told stories about being afraid to go out of their own downtown condo with their children because of what they have to face in the street below. So what can we do about it at our level? Maybe, and Councillor Manley said he'd like to get Mr. LaBerge's opinion on this, so would I. Maybe he will come back as part of this report and tell us, you know what, Council, there's really nothing realistically you can do that's enforceable or would be effective. And if he tells us that, then fair enough, I'll accept it. We have had two earlier notices of motion this evening asking for staff reports to provide information so that we can have a fulsome debate and make good decisions. That's all I'm asking for tonight. And I'd be really disappointed if Council is not willing to agree to that request. And yes, Councillor Brown, you're quite right. I am not known for bringing forward motions, and the only reason I have done so on this topic is because I sense from the community that this is so important to them. People want to know, what are you doing? What can you do? What can you try and do? Give us some options, give us some answers. So that's my request for information. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I've heard everybody talk about a bylaw. We're not even anywhere near that. One of the options may come back and it may say, we're going to designate 3 spots in town where this can be done. Like, I think we're being premature by not allowing that report to come forward, because there could be some very good ideas in that report. It may be that, you know what, we need to set up more safe consumption sites. That could be one of the options that comes back. It could be we're going to designate one of our parks someplace in town where that, you know what, people, you can go there and you can use there. So then at least people that in the rest of the community know, I'm not going to go to that park with my youth or my children, because I don't want to be worried about that. I've been to the hospital too many times with little kids that have gone to there because they've ingested drugs, left on streets and stuff, and I don't want to do it again. And I don't think any of you that have children would want to have to go there, because this council refused to even look at options that we could do to mitigate that. So I just think that people have jumped right away, we're going to have a bylaw to prohibit it. That's not it. The request is to look at options, and an option might be, we're going to have designated spots, designated parks. It might even be designated areas of town where, go ahead, do what you want. And I just think, I voted for reports for many things I don't believe in, just to get the report so that, as Councillor Hammond said, we can have a proper informed debate. Thank you.
Thank you. I have in order Councillors Perino, Brown, Gesselbrock, and Eastmere, and I trust we will have some new points and they'll be brief.
Your Worship, all of the comments that have been said so far are absolutely correct. Very little is working. Very little will work. If obviously you can't find somebody. I agree with all of that. The biggest point with this for me is that by doing a report, we make it public. And when we make it public, I'm hoping that the media will take it to the province and say, what are you going to do? And if Campbell River does it, and Kamloops does it, and Victoria does it, whatever cities do this same kind of a motion, I'm hoping that eventually the province will say, okay, we need to change our direction and do more, because what they're doing now isn't working. We have to do more. But by doing nothing, we are doing absolutely nothing. So for me, I have to vote in favor, even though I know the chances are very slim as to how we could put this forward, even if we did. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. New and brief. What's the difference that between before January 31st and after January 31st? From on the street, what it looks like. Absolutely nothing. Before January 31st, there was lots of people using in a whole variety of spaces, and that has carried over after January 31st with decriminalization. I appreciate it's just a staff report. I appreciate the search for answers. You know, I have young children. I know that I had to go 2 hours early to the Bowen Picnic Park shelter for the birthday party last year and pick up a whole bunch of items that I didn't want kids to be playing near or find. You know, that's tough. That's tough, and it's tough, even tougher for the folks that I ran into there, and I feel a lot of sympathy for them, especially for all the reasons Councillor Gesselbrock highlighted around no places to go, no places to get help if that's where they're at and that's where they can be met. But the reality is, the reason I just can't, because going down a path that just isn't productive, in the sense that it will have no material difference. You know, if we get the information report, we have a good debate, maybe we decide to go, council decides to go to have a bylaw, it won't change the impacts of the folks on the street that are living a certain way, and the challenges that they're facing, that I wish no human being ever had to live and face. And it won't change the fact of the parents that have to clean up at the parks and the business owners that have to clean the paraphernalia up in front of their business space, which again, that sucks too. Nobody signed up for that when they opened a business. So the reason I just can't support it is because even if there was a bylaw in place tomorrow, it would be no different than when these drugs were fully criminalized in terms of the usage on the street and the impacts it's having on the neighborhood and communities.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Armstrong's comments piqued my interest about designating parks for use and more safe consumption sites. That'd be an interesting twist to this report. But I think it does ultimately, the intent, I think, is to look at regulation of the public spaces. So thank you.
Councillor Eastmer and then Councillor Manley. That will be the third time, I believe. Well, it just seemed longer.
Jeez.
Councillor Eastmer.
Thank you. So, yeah, I feel like it's, Councillor Armstrong raised the fact that we seem to have jumped to bylaws on this, and I think that it's natural that we did that because the word regulate is in there, and that means rules. So like if the motion read something like mitigate the use of controlled substances, and then we can get super creative about like designated areas in town, like, forgive me, but I really don't feel like we're reading this motion wrong. Like this is sending us in the direction of a bylaw because of the word regulate. So if we wanted to talk about changing the language in this so that it was about looking at creative options to provide safe places for people to use drugs, that would be a different motion. But this motion is a no for me.
Councillor Manley.
I'm just going to agree with Councillor Eastmer. This is a motion for options to regulate, which is exactly that, bylaws. And I'm not happy seeing open drug use in our community. I am not happy with this. We hear from a lot of people that are upset about this, and some of those emails, they just want people to go away and die. Stop feeding them, stop giving them water, stop giving them shelter, let them deal with the consequences of their addiction, and they'll either die or change their ways. And we don't see enough people like Nurse Lovegrove here speaking for the other side of this. And that is the human cost of families, family members of people who are dying. So, you know, I'm not happy with what I'm seeing. If this was a motion that had options for mitigating and places, safe places for people to use and places for people to direct, that bylaw could direct people to, I'm not sure which park and which neighborhood would be happy about this. then I could support it, but I can't support it with the wording that it has right now. Thank you.
Well, this has certainly been interesting. I think we can all agree that nobody's happy with the current situation. I, for one, imbibe alcohol. I have never used drugs of any kind illicit in my life and have no intention of doing so. I frankly don't like being around the company of people who do. I don't enjoy it at all, so I want everyone to know where I start from in terms of my attitude. What I have heard tonight in Councillor Thorpe's motion is the cry of this community. We did not ask for mental health institutions to be closed. We did not ask senior governments to stop building housing. We did not ask senior governments to deregulate or decriminalize the taking of drugs, which with great respect may be used for recreational purposes, but ultimately are unhealthy in any way, shape, or form for public human consumption or private human consumption, because we all know now from statistics that the people who are dying of overdoses are doing so generally in sheltered situations in their own homes, and yes, they're workers and all of that. What I hear from Councillor Thorpe tonight is something I will happily support. Not because, frankly, I believe we will have the legal authority to do so. I'm very conscious of that. I'll give you my free legal opinion tonight on this. The province and a court case, whoever, will decide that we have no ability to regulate the use of controlled substances in public spaces. And I suspect a staff report may come back, potentially with a legal opinion that will tell us that as well. But I am not about to sit back in this community and watch the public consumption of drugs, the horrors that exist in our street, without at least picking up a stone to throw against senior government's window and get some attention. Now, I know it's not going to work necessarily, but I am not going to sit back and wait for something good to happen and drift down from Victoria or Ottawa that will solve the social crisis, the human crisis of our times. I'm willing to pick up the stone like Councillor Thorpe and chuck it, and it'll get some attention. And as Councillor Perino pointed out, if we chuck enough rocks, maybe it'll really get some attention. And I'm sorry that we've been reduced to this state, but that's the way it is. So I, for one, want some attention drawn to this, and I am going to vote for Councillor Thorpe's motion for that reason. Not because I think it will be effective, not because I think staff are going to tell us we'll be able to regulate it, not because I believe for a moment that fining people who live in poverty on the streets will change their behaviors as a result. I acknowledge all of that, but I am not prepared to sit back as a community and just wait for something to happen. Let's chuck the first rock. I'm with Councillor Thorpe on this, and thank goodness, oh, Councillor Gesselbrock. No, you've had 3 times. I'm
Well,
sorry. I'm sorry, Councillor Gesselbrock. I'm going to play the big rule. No.
You're only allowed to speak twice in the bylaw.
Call the vote. All those in favor of the vote? All those in favor of the motion?
Whoa.
The vote.
She said call the vote, so you get a vote to see if you can call the vote.
Oh.
That was the vote, now she's calling the motion.
No, not an error. All those in favor of the motion? Councillors Armstrong, Hemmons, Mayor Krogh, Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Perino. Those opposed? Councillors Eastmere, Gesselbrock, Brown, and Manley. Thank goodness, everybody. Glad this debate's over with.
We have to go back.
Now we have to go back to in camera. Ms. Gurry, please. Leave the room now.
Yeah, Your Worship, there was one other item, I wasn't aware of it, but I believe Councillor Brown might have something he wishes to get a motion for in the open. I'm not sure, Councillor Brown, was there something you were going to request a motion from council for?
It's nice to have someone keeping on track. Yes, Council, I think you're all aware. I would just like to move that, or seek Council's endorsement, move it in some sort of motion that will get picked up properly in wording to attend the PIBC annual Planning Institute of British Columbia annual conference at Sun Peaks at the end of this month.
Seconded.
Thank you. And yeah, just a training opportunity that really focuses on municipal and rural planning issues.
All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. Now we have to get back to in camera. And there's another item we have to discuss in camera in the absence of all staff as well.
We will adjourn it after, recess the open meeting, and we will adjourn it after we are done with the in-camera session.
All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you.